So I'm going to get us started. Welcome to the webinar. My name is Kat Ollinger, and I am one of the clinical assistant professors at the University of Iowa. And today's topic for our webinar is going to be how to approach finding a job as a young surgeon. We have three different approaches, and I'm going to start with the academic side of things. I have no relevant disclosures for this talk. The objectives for this are going to be pretty straightforward. How to start your search if you haven't started so quickly yet, or if you've already in the process of searching, how to best find the academic positions available, whether cold calls or emails are a good thing to use, knowing which resources are best available. And once you do find a job or interviewing or given some options, how to discuss contracts and managing expectations. Starting your search. So most academic centers will try to gravitate towards the more reputable websites. Not saying that they couldn't actually even use a recruiter, but most oftenly you'll see a university posting on NAS and on the Academy for Orthopedic Surgeons. I'm not familiar with the neurosurgery side of things, but NASP does post both orthopedic and neurosurgery spine job postings, and those links are in the presentation as well, and they are updated continuously, and they're very, very thorough descriptions of the job, where it's posted. If it's an academic center that maybe has an offsite, that will list that it's not actually at the original site. The university websites themselves are also really very good resources. Every university that's associated with the state is required to post the job, even if they're planning on hiring in-house. And so you can actually see job available postings. Most oftenly, academic centers are also looking for people at the same time. And so they're starting to call residency directors, fellowship directors. They might send out emails, and there's a lot of word of mouth with academics, which I thought when I started looking for an academic job was actually pretty intriguing. I figured it would be very formal and all on websites and through the university. And it was actually a great deal amount of it had to do with who knew who and kind of who knew when postings were coming available. And using those previous connections, we've all been in academia now at least for 6 or 7 years for training purposes, and even further for education. And so had you been a med student who rotated somewhere, who knew that, there was certain job openings or connections from previous training opportunities, I do think are really important in starting your search. I do think that there is a slight utility in cold calls and emails. It might be something that's more private sector driven, but most academic programs list contacts on their websites. And actually, you can just look up my name, and my email is listed on the website. And so if you're looking for an academic job and you know where you want to go, you can look, and the website should have a contact for either the chair or their liaison. You can identify locations and programs and start that conversation pretty early on. But you really, really, really need to harness or give adequate reasons as to why you're applying. If you are not a state resident from that state, they usually want to know why you want to move to California, Texas, Iowa. Most people are really weird about why people want to move to Iowa if you're not from Iowa. So you have to give good reasons. And those are things that they expect. If you're giving your time, or if you're asking them to give their time to you via a call or an email, you need to know why you're applying and what they're looking for as well. Back to your resources, I do think that most of us have a program director, either in residency or fellowship, that has at one point or another talked to you about a job. And if they have, who do they know? My residency program director was, my main point of contact in most of the places that I interviewed. They'd be like, oh, how was Quinn Throckmorton? And you'd be like, oh, he's great. You need to know their previous connections as well. It is very helpful if your residency gives you a list of prior trainees, and knowing those connections can actually be very helpful if someone who had trained where you have trained is now working at an institution that you're interested in. You should just contact them. And it might sound odd and weird, but most oftenly people like hearing from people who they trained with or trained near with or have been in the same institution. it brings back a lot of memories, and people are pretty quick to share. My fellowship director and my faculty connections with my fellowship at the University of Washington in Seattle were probably better resources in not finding a job, but finding the right job and making sure that you make those correct choices for the type of practice that you're looking for. They all go to the same conferences. They all know each other very well. And if you're trying to get a job at an academic institution, they most oftenly know the people that you are interviewing with. And so you should honestly ask them, is this a good fit for me? I've worked for you for this long. Now you know how I am. Is this going to be a good fit? And they will tell you for better or for worse, which I think is extremely important. Understanding that when you are dealing with a university, that there are quite a few differences. And then the two main ones that I think, even if you aren't taught about contracts in residency or in fellowship, that you need to understand that a university system more definitely has a preset contract and a university-wide standard non-compete clause. Here at the University of Iowa, that's not as much of an issue. There's not very many other universities to compete with, but you need to understand that you don't have the same bargaining power as you would if you were maybe not dealing with a major university. Everyone has the same non-compete clauses. Everyone has the same contract. There is a little bit of wiggle room. It's not to say that you're, chained and shackled to everything that they give you. I did use a lawyer when I talked to the places that I had applied, and it offered me contracts. And I think that's really important. They understand what the university can offer you that's standardized, but they also are available and able to read the contracts and understand where that wiggle room is. You might not be getting the same salary, or maybe your salary cap is a little less than maybe somebody in private practice. However, maybe they give you resources for research, traveling, going to conferences, being an academic surgeon, you go to teaching conferences and things like that. So there might be other ways of compensating you through that. And if you have a lawyer on your side, I think that's really important. The main goal to this talk and understanding how to find an academic job is managing your expectations. What are your goals? Are you comfortable with academia because you've been in it for so long and that's what you want? Or do you understand the implications of working for a major university that you may or may not have as much of a voice or control? Knowing that you, like we talked about the salary, your salary cap or propensity might be less than that of your friends who go into private practice, but maybe that doesn't, necessarily, maybe that's not your number one thing. Is it family related? Do you want to live in a location that's very specific and that happens to be your only opportunity? Understanding an organization related to an academic medical center is also paramount. My academic medical center is owned by the state, and there is a university physician group associated with that I work for. So I actually work for the state, but I have a friend who works for a university who actually works for a private healthcare corporation that owns the hospital, but is affiliated with the university. And we'll get into that a little bit, but you need to know the type of organization that you're working for. Practice mix. A lot of the types of cases that you're going to see most oftenly have to do with a university hospital. At the University of Iowa, we're the only tertiary level 1 trauma center in the state. So you need to know what your practice mix is going to be. Understand that you're going to get revisions and trauma and tumors and pediatrics that other facilities in your state are not capable of taking care of, and you need to be comfortable with that. Call requirements are also very important in managing your expectations. I take both spine and general call, and I have residents who cover both. And so maybe my call isn't as strenuous as maybe my private practice partners, but I understand what my requirements are. And knowing that on the front end, if you go into a practice where you're a private guy or maybe a university guy that's hospital owned and there's only one other spine surgeon, how much of that call are you responsible for? Is there neurosurgery involved if you're orthopedics, or is there orthopedics involved if you're a neurosurgeon? And what is that like? I really do think that a lot of things that are also evaded with the universities is being a part of one. I am a clinical assistant professor. I have research obligations that I must fulfill. And you should understand that those actually come in your contract. If you do not fulfill your research obligations, or what are they? Are you on a tenured track that has a certain timeline to those research obligations? You should know that going in and not be blindsided by the fact that you need to spend time doing research and also watching football. Also managing your expectations that there might be unique quirks about places that you've never been. For instance, there's a bike race in Iowa that goes across the entire state. It's called RAGBRAG. We love it. And knowing that I can live 8 miles down the road, or excuse me, 8 minutes, mile and a half down the road from my hospital in a rural area, love what I do every day, but then still get to take care of things like this, where, this is a massive renal cell tumor that I did a anterior posterior reconstruction on that normally would be at a major city center. And because I'm the only location that everything like this gets sent to in this state, she was one of my first cases, and I love it. So managing your expectations, knowing what you're getting into, and especially at an academic institution, I think is really important. And when you're finding a job, any questions, or if you ever think of anything, again, my email is actually on the website, but you can email me at any point. I'm happy to discuss.
Hey, this is Scott Blumenthal. Kat, really great talk. The other thing of that, my friends who work for the UT system in Texas, they have to be aware of, and I'm sure you are, is that when you work for the state, anybody can get online and access what your salary is. And if that's, important for you not to have your friends and family know, that that's something you need to take into consideration as well.
Absolutely, Dr. Blumenfeld. I totally agree. You can look and see how much our football coach makes, and then how much everyone else makes beneath him at this university. And that I didn't even know was a thing. It obviously doesn't really bother me, but yeah, that is a very good point. Thank you for bringing that up.
Hey, Kat, maybe talk about how many places in an academic job you feel like people need to look at, and how many you looked at, and kind of that process, if that's different, you think, than a private.
I thought it was actually a lot of, because I applied to both. So I probably actually formally interviewed with about 8 academic medical centers. I was formally offered contracts at all of the places that I interviewed. I think that was too much. I really do think that it, kind of tailors to what you're looking for. And, I had a few contacts that bloomed into more contacts that just kind of led to that discussion. I don't think there's a sweet spot, but I do think you should be prepared for, one, people asking you why you're applying to academia. And then just like in residency or fellowship, are you applying to other places that they might work with you, or that they have trainees who've worked there as well? I apologize. I don't have COVID, I promise. So yeah, I did about 8, and I thought that was a little too much, but I now have those connections at those other places.
Hey, Kat, having looked at 8, was there a lot of variability between offered in academic jobs, or were most of them right down the middle of the plate? Because you've got the experience now to tell us.
They were so different, and I had no idea it would be that different. I applied to one medical center that I was 100% sure that I would love. And then I realized that I was going to be like an outreach physician and not in anywhere near shape or form involved in trauma. And that was not, I come from Harborview. I live and breathe spine trauma. It's one of my favorite things. And so for me not to be able to participate in level 1 spine care, even though I was applying to a university program, was shocking to me. And we kind of, during that interview, got to that point where we both realized that maybe this wasn't going to be the better fit for both of us. And it was insane, but it was intriguing to me that that was so palpably different. And I didn't realize that that was the case at a major academic university.
Yeah, that was an excellent talk. I got some post-traumatic stress disorder seeing the Iowa football team, because my first career start at Syracuse was at Iowa. That is notoriously, that stadium has the seats about 6 feet behind the bench. You can have the Iowa fans telling you how awful a person you are and get things thrown on you. So I'll recover from that. But question for you, when you are just getting started and you have residents under you now, what's your workflow? How did you introduce yourself, and how do you fit them into your practice?
I believe in co-surgeon teaching. That's how I was taught at both my residency and my academic fellowship. And so I really am very fluid with them. I say, have you done this before? And they say yes or no. And then we kind of walk through it. I do things strikingly different than both of my partners currently. And so that was another reason why I think I was hired, is that they wanted to see something different. And so I've really approached it as kind of almost being like a chief and saying, hey, like, we're going to do this case together. This is why we're doing this. And I've been very open with my residents, and I hope that they enjoy that type of teaching. I rely on them for ancillary support, but I have my own ancillary as well. I have a PA who is assigned to me. And so I have tried to incorporate them into my practice at the beginning so that, it just kind of becomes a fluid relationship. I think it is really important to set the expectation with the resident. If they're a younger resident and they've never seen something, and you're doing, C12 or C12 fixation, and they've never done it, I wouldn't necessarily take it from them, but I would make them, tell me what we were doing and kind of walk them through the process and co-surgeon with them. I might be wrong, but that's kind of how I approach things, and they seem to not have revolted on me yet. So I hope that to continue that kind of relationship, because that was the other, I guess I didn't really speak to the teaching aspect of things, but it was very important to me to give back to the orthopedic spine community by being a teacher and showing people things that necessarily aren't what they've always been taught, because that's how we learned. And I really hone in on that approach. So hopefully they appreciate it. They might not in a couple of years. I'll let you know, Jim.
I'll tell you the other fun thing to expect for the young academicians, and I don't know whether where everybody is in their career, but in whether it was my orals or one of my recertifications, because obviously they know where you practice and that we have a fellowship at Texas Back. Besides grilling you on your cases for your orals, you may be asked, are you in the room for the whole case? How much of the case do you let the residents or fellows do? And I expected all the academic questions at my oral boards. That one threw me for a loop. Fortunately, we're more of a private practice than university, so we're there all the time. But don't be surprised if you get asked that question at one of your oral exams.
Yeah, very good point. I actually dictated at the bottom of my note what I was there for. I think it's a billing thing as well, or if I'm using an APP and not a resident. But yeah, you got to know if you're not there, you got to accept the responsibility of not being there, and then what happened when you weren't there. So I completely appreciate that, Dr. Blumenthal. Thank you.